Hello, welcome to today's masterclass from Learning Zone 3, where we're looking at some components of fitness, both health related and performance related. We're going to go through what they are, but also how they're applied in sport as well. So by the end of this lesson, what we should know is, just get up here, we should have the definitions for all 10 components from health related and performance related fitness. You should also be able to link these to certain sports. And then by the end, you should also be able to justify which components of fitness are most important for certain sports. And we've got a couple of examples in this lesson, but it's going to be equipping you with the tools and the approach that you can take away with you and then analyze any sport that's thrown your way. Of course, there are some activity sheets within this as well, so if you haven't already, have those printed off or downloaded locally. If not, then you can just pause this video when the time's right and you can access it there and then. So, to start it off, there is a bit of a starter question, a bit of a starter activity that I've got for you. From the images below, who do you think has good health? Who do you think has high levels of fitness? I'll give you 10 seconds to have a think. Let's have a scan through the pictures. Who do you think has good health? And who do you think has high levels of fitness? So health and fitness. You might be thinking, well, they're the same thing, aren't they? If you're fit, then you're healthy, and if you're healthy, that means you must be fit. But what we're going to be looking at is, well, there is actually a subtle difference between the two of them, and we'll come back to these pictures and people very shortly. So to start with, we're going to look at health. Now, health is, and this is the definition that you need, so if you are taking notes, this is what you'll have. Or what you need. Health is the complete physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being of a person. It's not just the absence of illness. So we've got these 4 dimensions of health: physical, emotional, mental, social. And what I'm hoping you've realised is physical, which is what we tend to associate with fitness, that's just 1/4 of it. So health is this broader term, and the World Health Organization define it as this complete, all-round physical, mental, social, emotional well-being. It's not just not being sick. It's ticking the box in all 4. So to be lacking in any area reduces someone's overall health. So you could be really emotionally healthy. You could be physically fit. You could have the best social life. But mentally, you've got low self-confidence. You've got anxiety. You've got high levels of stress in your day-to-day lifestyle, which is becoming ever present, especially with the rise of online presence and social media. So to be lacking in one detracts from overall health. So as sports students, or people who are likely to go into active lifestyles and potentially active professions, we need to be aware that we're not just trying to develop someone's physical area, but we're also trying to approach the other 3 as well. So health and wellness, what actually makes up these 4 different components? If we start off with emotional, these are our feelings. So how do we feel on a day-to-day basis? Are we happy or are we stressed? Are we content with what we do? How can physical activity contribute to this? Well, it can aid these feelings of accomplishment. If we set some goals and we set some targets and we make gradual progress, we're going to feel good about ourselves. It's going to be enjoyable to see us making progress. Social. How can sport and PE and physical activity contribute to social well-being? Well, it's an opportunity to interact. If you're playing team sports or you have friends or partners who you can train together with, it provides this environment that you can socially interact. You can develop these personable skills, communication skills, tolerance, depending on the situation. So sport, PE, activity, great medium to develop social health. Mental. I sort of spoke earlier on about that feeling of accomplishment, but if we sort of take emotional and mental as 2 separate things for the moment, well, mental, cognitive processes, speed of thought, decision making. If you've done the lesson on ability and skill, and we've got those 3 different types of skills: psychomotor, perceptual, and cognitive. Well, sport is great at developing the cognitive component. great at developing the perceptual component, and especially the psychomotor. Because cognitively, we've got to think creatively in ever-changing, fast-paced environments such as sport. We need to be able to perceive what's going on and generate this mental image of the opponents, our teammates, the problems that the sporting activity posed to us. And then obviously psychomotor, because we've now got to translate thought, which is imagination and nothing really. We need to translate that into impulses through our motor neurons, into our muscles, into an action. So very good for stimulating the brain and making it think and comprehend things and make decisions. And then physical, obviously, because when we're moving, we're stressing the cardiovascular system, the muscular system. If we can stress it enough, but not too much, and we can wear it down slightly, then we can stimulate recovery, we can stimulate repair, and our body goes over and above and it gradually gets better and better. And then obviously the health risks begin to get minimized as well. So if we do constantly or persistently stress our bones, our joints, our cardiovascular system, they're going to respond and get stronger. So that when we do return to our resting day-to-day levels, we've got well-trained and we've got systems which are capable of managing at far higher intensity. So they're going to find it day-to-day living so easy. So that's just a look at how physical activity can promote the 4 different domains of overall health. Now, what we're going to be looking at in a moment is sort of just the physical side of things and how fitness can be split down even further than just the physical part of health. But before we do that, we're going to go back to that starter activity that we begun with. And we're going to do a bit of a health check. So I asked you, are they healthy, or who's healthy, and who's got good levels of fitness? So we had an office worker, and she's looking happy, she's got thumbs up, fantastic. So socially, she might be okay. Mentally, she might be in a good job, that she's striving for different targets and she's feeling accomplished. But at what cost? She's at the desk all day. What's her physical activity like? What's her diet like? Does she have high periods or periods of high stress? Where because of the work-life balance, does work take over? It's only a picture. We're just making assumptions, but that's sort of the point that I want to get across, really. Health and fitness aren't just, something that you can easily measure. There's so many different factors that go into it, and there's a lot of background before we decide if someone is, healthy and on the whole. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but are they healthy on the whole? Person in the military, physically, they're probably going to be very fit because they need to be active. They need to be able to respond to physically demanding situations. But again, what about the stress? What about being distanced from the people, the closest, the family and friends closest to you? How does that make someone feel emotionally? Sad, happy, lonely, isolated? So at what cost does this physical fitness come at? Then we have someone who is a cyclist, a Deliveroo, I believe it is. So a cyclist delivery person. On their bike for hours at a time, fitness is probably very high. They've probably got a great work-life balance in terms of clocking on or clocking off. They can choose when to work. But do they have to work at certain times during the day? Have a think. When do you order most takeaways? Probably in the evenings, when you're sitting down, relaxing with friends and family. Well, the delivery people, they're the ones who are currently working. So do they feel isolated? Do they have opportunities to unwind with friends and family if that's when they're working? And then we've got 2 tennis players, elite level. I believe it's Sharapova and Murray. Both of which notoriously have gone through quite public periods of anxiety, stress, media pressure. Murray because he's been championed as someone who suddenly sort of the UK and GB get behind. Sharapova because of drugs and the ban that she went through. Both reached #1, but at what cost? Murray's recently pulled out from professional sport because of injuries sustained playing the sport that he loves. Sharapova banned for a number of years. Fitness levels have subsequently dropped. Therefore, will she get to play at the same level again? So physically, fit as anyone could possibly be in tennis. But what about mentally, emotionally, suffering from that stress of public attention? So that's health and how physical activity can tie into sort of the general sense of the term. Now we're going to look at fitness. And fitness, first off, is the ability to meet the demands of the environment. And the environment is ever changing. So as the type of environment a person can be in is changeable, so too is their level of fitness. I'm just looking at that top point there in the black box. So really what we should be asking ourselves is, well, fit, but fit for what? What components of fitness have you got that are well developed, which suit you for which type of environment? Because, just going back there to the tennis players, I wonder how they'd fare in a boxing match. I wonder how they'd fare in a rugby match. I wonder how they'd fare in an ultra marathon or in a game of snooker or darts. Different sports pose different environments, and those environments pose different demands on the person. So it stands to reason that the person will have to have different capabilities to respond to the different demands of the different environments. So even though we call it fitness, we now know that fitness is multidimensional, just like health has got 4 different domains. And what we're going to be looking at is how fitness, broadly speaking, has 2 domains, and then each one of those has got 4 or 6 different components to it. So before we go further into the different components of fitness, we're going to sort of stop here for a moment and then sort of look at lifestyle factors that are creeping in and impacting on not just health and not just fitness, but the whole package. So as a society, there's an increasing shift from active to mobile or sedentary, as it's also called. Think of sedentary as being the level of intensity between sleep and walking. So anything that stresses the body below what walking does and above what sleep does, that's sedentary. And there's an increasing amount of sedentary living in the population worldwide. Here's just a couple of examples. Instead of walking to the shops, now there's Uber, there's Amazon, there's Lyft. Instead of brushing your teeth, there's now electric toothbrush. Now I know that sounds a little bit pathetic, but the price of electric toothbrushes have come down massively. When they launched, I think about 15 years ago, they were really expensive. Small percentage of people actually traded the money for it. Now you can pick one up for about a tenner. And that compounded 2 times a day of just not moving the upper body. It sounds silly, but brushing your teeth is activity, whereas an electric toothbrush is sedentary because you're not moving. Children tended to play more in the garden, more outside, be it due to space because of housing or because of outside due to safety. But now with technological advances and very appealing entertainment systems in the online world, I should say, playing in the garden is just less incentivized. Going out to eat, that used to be going into the car or walking, and then you're actually active inside the restaurant. Or you go out to buy the ingredients, you carry the ingredients back, then you're active when you're making it. Whereas now, click of a button, it's at your door. And then sport as well. Popularity of sport beginning to decline, especially in the younger populations, while esports is gradually on the rise. So that box on the right there, that's sort of quite key really. While there's nothing bad about these developments, they just are. They just are the developments, and like it or not, that's the way society is starting and continuing to spend more of its time doing. But what's the cost to fitness? If we are trying to develop anyone into being fit for their environment, then surely we need to make up the lost time. The lost time that used to be popping to the shops, brushing your teeth, playing in the garden. Where are we making that physical activity time up? As sports students and possibly physical people or going into physical professions, that's something that we need to be considering. So, first activity is in the activity sheet attached to this lesson inside the portal. Very simply, define health, define fitness, the 4 different components of health, and then summarize a couple of factors that we just discussed there, or come up with your own. It's up to you. But yeah, either pause the video and do that now, or just go through the whole thing and then go back to the whole activity sheet at the end. But we're going to move on for now. So, components of fitness. This is now the sort of second part of everything. We've done health as a whole, we've done fitness as a more specific entity. Now we're going to break fitness apart. And like I said, we have these 2 domains. We've got health components and performance components. So within your health category, we've got muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, aerobic endurance, also termed cardiorespiratory endurance, and body composition. If you're looking for a way to try and remember that, the one that I go for is that ice lolly, that fab ice lolly, the one with the red and the white and the rainbow sprinkles up at the top. It's a fab ice lolly and they're tasty, so fab. That's how I've come to remember that, and that's how I teach students. Performance components: agility, balance, coordination, power, reaction time, and speed. If you're looking for a way to remember these in the letter order, that mnemonic, power crabs. So power goes first and then C-R-A-B-S. Power crabs. And what we're going to do now is go through each of these. Before we do, health components. What's the difference really between health and performance? Well, health components, they assist us in day-to-day life. These are sort of the fundamentals. We need these to carry out most daily tasks. Carrying the shopping, carrying your school bag, walking to get the bus, standing on your feet for 30, 40, 50 minutes at a time during lunchtime. We need these as a basic level to achieve most daily tasks. The performance components, these are ones that, well, obviously we can develop the health ones as well, but the performance components, we require these in more specialist capacities. So it doesn't matter if you're not agile if you don't play sport. But if you play any sort of active and dynamic sport, like volleyball for example, you need agility. If you cycle a bike, you need balance. If you play a racket sport, you need coordination. You don't really need coordination to walk up the stairs and go to work. Not any high level of coordination at least. So health components, they help us get by day to day, satisfying most environments. But our performance components, these are the ones that we tend to train and develop, and we specialize in them so that we can execute skill actions to a high level. So we're going to start off with health components. We've got that fab just there: muscular strength, endurance, flexibility, aerobic endurance, and body comp. Muscular strength. We are going to go through each of these individually, so don't feel like you have to note them down straight away. We are going to go through each one individually. But muscular strength, the maximum force a muscle can generate. Okay, not 10 reps. We're talking 1 repetition, 1 range of motion, 1 contraction. It's the maximum output that muscle can achieve. Muscular endurance, the opposite. How many or how long can a muscle contract over and over and over again, repeatedly, against the resistance, without fatigue? So think walking, running, cycling, swimming for anything longer than 20, 30, 40 minutes, that's muscular endurance. Flexibility, the range of movement available at a joint. We should know that a joint is where 2 or more bones meet and articulate. So if this here was my femur, which is thigh, behind your quads and in front of your hams, if that's your femur, and that's your femur, and then this here is your lower leg. Obviously, we've got our knee joint, 2 bones meeting, and they articulate during knee flexion and knee extension. Things that can limit how far they can articulate around each other are the joint structure, so which way that they can actually roll around each other, but also flexibility of muscles. So the range of movement available to joint, the flexibility. Aerobic endurance or cardiorespiratory endurance. How efficiently can we transport oxygen and nutrients to the working muscles during activity? Can we keep the activity levels up? Or do we get this accumulation of lactic acid? Do we run out of O2 supply? And we have to stop exercise. Aerobic endurance, that efficient transport and utilization of oxygen and nutrients. And then body composition, the proportions or ratios of fat mass to fat-free mass. Now we typically look at bone, muscle, fat. Bone doesn't change, well, obviously when you're growing it does, but when you reach adulthood and maturity, bone mass doesn't really change until post 25-30, and then suddenly, well not suddenly, gradually it deteriorates again through into old age. Similarly with muscle as well, but obviously through training and hypertrophy, we can gradually increase muscle mass, but fat mass, that is changeable, okay, and relatively quickly, or quickly in relation to changing muscle mass and bone mass. So to kick it off, we are going to look at muscular strength, and maximum force can come in these 4 different ways. We've got maximal, so 1 repetition. That's what I mentioned earlier with the definition. Just 1 forceful contraction. We're not worried about speed. We're not worried about timing of it or the coordination that it leads to or the limb movement. Just a maximum force output. Static. No movement is now required. We're dealing with what's called an isometric muscle contraction. Isotonic, meaning the muscle is moving while under tension. Isometric is it's stationary. So this gymnast here holding that crucifix position, holding that pike position. How long can they hold that for? At what force output can they sustain that? So a good test for that would be to pull or go into a pull-up position to 90 degrees and hold that position there. Dynamic, so the ability to link multiple maximal contractions together using different muscle groups at the same time, but organized. So to sustain application of strength. Most invasion games will require dynamic strength. Explosive is sort of a combination really of dynamic and maximal. So dynamic thinks sequences of events, slightly longer term application, 100-meter sprint for example. Explosive, however, that's 1 contraction, but we complete it as fast as we can. So for the shot put, for example, now that's quite a light object. So as we transfer all of our force output into the shot put, we're able to throw it quite far. Because if we compare that to the picture on the left-hand side there with maximal strength, we're not throwing this loaded bar, but we're able to slowly complete 1 full contraction. Muscular endurance, like we've already said, it's the ability to perform repeat contractions of a muscle against a lower resistance, but we can fight fatigue. So the example there, Tour de France, where we've got cyclists completing, hour-long, day-long stages, and they're doing these, one after the other, day after day, week after week. That's going to require muscular endurance. Now, cycling, unless you are going for the sprint finish or you're on a particularly steep incline, they're going to be working at moderate intensity because they know they've got hours to go. So the muscle needs to be able to complete these contractions without becoming damaged, without losing or running out of glycogen stores, being able to deal with any production of lactic acid for a long period of time. Flexibility, like we said, the range of movement at a joint. Gymnastics, diving, swimming, football. To create the shapes that we need, not just in aesthetically pleasing events where we're scored for these for the routine that we put together, but for most sports, if you can create with your body a wider range of shapes safely and be in control of your limbs in those strange creative positions, then you've got more skills at your disposal. I've spoken before in some lessons before this about Zlatan Ibrahimovic, about how he scored a bicycle kick. To be able to manipulate your body and put your leg above head height in a controlled manner to bring about an accurate skill, that's impressive. If someone had tight hamstrings or gluteals and their foot doesn't really go above their hip height, which is shockingly, I think, a little bit like me, then there's no way that they'd be able to produce that sort of action. So flexibility, range of movement at a joint. We can create better shapes, both aesthetically pleasing and creative. Aerobic endurance, the efficient transport of oxygen and nutrients to working muscles to sustain activity and avoid fatigue. Working very, very much hand in hand with muscular endurance here, because the muscle is obviously contracting, but it requires the constant delivery of oxygen, fresh glucose or glycogen, and the removal of carbon dioxide. So aerobic endurance, we need good cardiac muscle. We need healthy lungs and the muscles that control air in and out of our lungs. They need to be in good condition so that we can get fresh air in, oxygen out, and delivered around the blood, and then CO2 back into that air so then we can exhale. Body composition. Now this is Terry Hollins. He was world strongest man? I think he might have been. There you go, world's strongest man, 2018. Now he's someone who's gone on a huge body transformation, and there's things that you will need to learn called mesomorph, endomorph, and ectomorph. So somatotypes, which we will cover in a separate lesson. But this is the same person in 3 different body compositions. In the one on the left, higher ratio of fat to muscle and bone. Now he's probably just as strong in the left-hand picture than he is in the middle, but he's just got more fat stored in his body. Compare that to the one all the way over on the right, he's very lean here. That's probably the least fat he's ever had on his body. Whereas the one in the middle, he's probably got a bit of a balance. He's definitely got more muscle in that central picture than he has in either one of the others, by the looks of things. So the same person can transition, and their composition of fat mass, bone mass, muscle mass, it can change. And depending on the sport, the environment, the situation that we're preparing for, we can elect to choose what composition that we have. So that is health components. We're now going to look at the performance components, and we have power crabs: agility, balance, coordination, power, reaction time, and speed. So first off, agility, change in direction without loss of speed or balance. Balance, keeping your center of mass, so that central point, if you were to spread all of your mass out, that center point would be where you'd find balance. Everything is on average the same distance away from that center point. And you need to keep that above a base of support. So where you're in contact with the surface that you're currently on, so at the moment I'm on the ground, I've got 2 feet on the ground, therefore I've got a base of support that runs around the edge of my feet outline, and it's the space in between my feet as well. So as long as my center of mass, which is roughly speaking behind my belly button, as long as that stays above, so vertically above that base of support on the ground, I'm going to keep my balance. Coordination, using different body parts at the same time, smoothly, accurately, in a coordinated fashion, with good timing, with precision, with accuracy, all of these descriptive words. Now there's that, it's one of those tests in America, isn't it? I think it's for driving under the influence. So if you reach out towards the side, close your eyes, can you touch your nose? To be aware of where your arm is, where your nose is, and to try and touch the 2 points together accurately. If you were under the influence and your coordination was impaired, then it might be that you miss. Low, high, side, side. Power, completing work quickly. Now we saw earlier on in strength how we can have maximal, where we don't really fuss too much about speed, just the strength, and then explosive strength, where it's application of high amounts of strength, but as fast as we can. The combination of the two is power. Maximum force output as quickly as we can. Reaction time, the time delay between the onset of a stimulus and the initiation of the response. Something happens, we register what happened. It's that time delay. So in 100 meters, for example, the gun goes bang. There's a delay. If you were to watch it in slow motion, you'd probably be thinking, why isn't anyone moving? The bang goes, everyone interprets that information and then puts into action their response, which is to leave the blocks. And then speed, the time taken to cover a distance. And there are different types: accelerative, pure, and then endurance. Accelerative is the rate of change from resting to maximum. How quickly can we go from no speed to maximum speed? Pure, that is your top speed. So I think it was Usain Bolt, when he was setting the world record, it was running at something like 34, 35 kilometers an hour. That's rapid. It's like a car. Whereas other people, they didn't quite reach that same pure speed, but they overtook him at the start because they had better accelerative speed. Endurance is then the ability to go from maximum sprint into another maximum sprint, into another maximum sprint, over and over and over again, with limited recovery time in between. So how quickly can your body recover from that sprint and get it set and prepared for a repeat sprint? So, examples: rugby, Gaelic football, camogie. This changing of directions, where we might be trying to outwit the defender. We're trying to send them one way while thinking of going the other way, and we're trying to make them lose balance to try and carve out a bit of extra time for us to exploit new spaces. Balance. Now, I didn't mention it before, but there are two types: static and dynamic. It's still, or both still refer to that idea of centre of mass over base of support. Static is when we're stationary. Very important for things like gymnastics and aesthetically pleasing events. Dynamic is when we're on the move. So linked very closely to agility, where we're changing direction without loss of speed or balance. So dynamic balance, maintaining an awareness of where our centre of mass is, where our base of support is, and always keeping them correlated. Coordination. So we've got golf swings here and a badminton smash. The ability to use different parts of our body together accurately with control. Can we bring about a sequence of events that culminates in a predetermined contact point? For golf or badminton, it's the object hitting the second object. Can we make them collide at the right time, at the right angles, the right application of force to generate the best outcome possible? In golf, 1 millimetre difference on a ball can translate into 25-metre difference down the driving range, if not more. Badminton, a millimetre or two difference on the contact point in the racket, and you get a different tension of the string. So you can get a 140 kilometre smash, or you could get a 90 kilometre smash. Important to note, these two examples, hand-eye coordination, I should have said. But it can also be limb to limb. It can be foot to eye coordination. It can be hand to foot coordination. So we can always label it whichever parts of our body are working together. Power, speed, time, strength. Very important in physical competition. Very important in maximal personal best efforts as well in things like athletics. We're applying as much force as we can in a shorter time frame as possible to increase the effectiveness of our movements. It's things like a scrum, things like a tackle, things like discus, shot put, high jump. We want as much power to transfer from the body into something else to generate big effects. Reaction time. So that time delay between the onset of a stimulus and the initiation of a response. Could be soccer goalkeeper. A shot happens and they have to respond accordingly as soon as they possibly can. Going back to that, the three different types of skills: psychomotor, perceptual skill, where perceptual is reading your environment and taking this information in and then processing it. And then speed, time taken to cover a distance. Now, it could be the whole body, like in a foot race, but it might also be limb speed. So in a table tennis strike, for example, you're going to be better off, or you're going to be able to put more spin onto the ball if your elbow flexion speed and the rate at which your forearm can come up, you're going to be better if that's faster. It's covering a distance, which is what, there to there is probably what, 70 centimeters perhaps? So that's a distance. I've got 90 degrees worth of movement. How quickly can I cover that distance? If I can cover that distance quickly, then I can translate that into rotations of the table tennis ball, which is spin, making it more difficult for my opponent. So, to complete the activity sheet, you will need to access the one that you have been using. And then on that, if you go into activity 2, complete the 2 tables, the 2 grids with the 2 categories of components of fitness, health and performance. Get your definitions down and some examples from sport. So either pause this video and do that now, or like before, wait to the end and you can go back into that whenever you need to. Okay, last section, just looking at the overview below me here, we have got evaluating the relevance of different fitness components in different sports. So evaluating the importance of different components of fitness. So a performer is, well, I should say, why do we care? Why do we care about evaluating components of fitness? Because a performer is limited in the time that they have available to train, especially elite performers, where they've factored in time frames and they periodized their training and they've got certain goals to hit by certain dates. So they should be spending their limited time on working on developing the components of fitness that will have the biggest impact on their overall progress. Because progress in one component of fitness may reduce the quality of the progress in another. So by evaluating the importance of different components of fitness, a performer can actually start to prioritize. That's a great word for this. They can prioritize which components to train because they can see which ones are most relevant to their sporting context. So we need to consider the ones which have the most impact, not just on movement quality, but on performance outcome. We don't just want to be able to execute skills properly, but we want to have the maximum effect in the game scenario. So I wonder, flexibility for a forward in rugby, very important, but would you trade flexibility for power and strength training? Probably not. So we need to spend time working on the components of fitness that will have the biggest effect in game scenarios. So you need to identify when in their sport they will use that component of fitness maximally and what the consequences could be if they didn't. That's an important thing to note. If I don't train, it's almost like it's looking at the cost of or the loss of opportunity. If I don't train it, what's going to be the negative outcome? What could my sport performance end up looking like if I didn't train it, if I didn't improve it? That could help with this prioritization. So we're going to look at some basketball. So I've listed there those components of fitness. So strength, endurance, flexibility, aerobic endurance, body composition, speed, agility, balance, coordination, power, and reaction time. And on the right-hand side, I won't read all of those out, but they're some examples of how all of them could be used in basketball. I want to get that across to you now. Most, if not all, components of fitness can and are used in most sports. It'd be very rare to find a sport that doesn't require, in some shape or form, one of the components of fitness. But your job as either a coach or a performer is to evaluate the most important. So that's what we're going to look at. First one, aerobic endurance. Well, for a basketball player, they've got 4 10 or 12 minute quarters at moderate to high intensity. It's not really low intensity walking or jogging here. They're probably going to be doing very fast paced jogs, closing down players, breaks. And if the person were to fatigue and their muscles were to get tired, then that could lead to seconds lost or meters lost, even centimeters lost if we're talking about trying to block a shot. So it's going to be so important for the person's cardiorespiratory system to continue this oxygen delivery, CO2 removal, lactic acid removal, nutrient supply. Because any slacking in that, all the other components of fitness are going to suffer. Agility, be it as an attacker or a defender, going to be very important to sort of outwit your opponent. So as an attacker, you want to be able to move your body around to try and create space from your defender so that you can have adequate space to perform a successful shot or a successful pass. As a defender, you need to be able to respond quickly to not allow your marker the space to receive a pass, have a shot, make the layup. Power, both in layups, rebounds, and dunks. To go from standing or stationary or dribbling into a maximal sprint, a maximal jump, to get as close to that hoop as quickly as you can before any defender can beat you to that zone and they're going to try and block you. So power to quickly transfer, strength as quickly as you can to get into the air, close to the hoop before defenders. But there is one which is arguable. So the three in green here, I've said are the most important, but we could argue that speed is also up there, especially to get in front of a defender or to track back and to get into, or no, sorry, to go ahead to get in front of a defender, or as a defender tracking back to defend. But the reason I put it in orange was because there's a lot of evidence, a lot of cases in basketball where the athletes aren't that fast. They've got better attributes, be it their agility, their power, their height, their size, where they can sort of trade off their speed for more of a different attribute. So it comes down to this prioritization. Some other examples from different types of sports. So ultramarathon and endurance events, they rely very heavily on those endurance components of fitness. Aerobic, muscular. Body composition, we can't be carrying around too much fat. Think back to that Terry Hollins picture, where he was carrying a lot of fat, some fat, no fat. If you're not carrying fat, you're probably going to weigh less. If you weigh the same or more because you've upped your muscle mass, well, at least muscles can contract and they can contribute to movement. Fat, that's just a free rider. That's just hanging on your body and you're having to exert energy to just move that fat mass around. In the middle, we've got shooting or target sports, balance, coordination, to hold yourself steady, to be able to coordinate your eye action with slight, fine movement of the fingertips. And I've also put there muscular endurance because you want to be able to replicate the same fine movement skills over and over. Fatigue could prevent that. If a muscle starts to seize up or cramp up, get tired, then when they go to contract again, they're going to be creating slightly different movements. And that could cost someone their performance success. And then some gymnastics and artistic sports. Flexibility to create the shape. Power to transfer from ground into air, into all of the rotation, where we need to generate force before we leave the ground, because it's more the conservation of momentum, if you've studied that within planes and axes yet, where in order to rotate in the air, we need to get as much force as we can off the floor. And we can't add to it when we start to spin. So we generate as much as we can as soon as we take off, and then we can manipulate it by drawing our body in closer. And obviously coordination, being able to look in a split second as you're spinning, where to put your hands, where to put your feet. Are they together? Are they apart? Do you extend just at the moment that you make contact with the floor of the surface of an object? So, lastly, is the third activity from the sheet, where there's 4 sporting contexts, and what you need to do is go through and just sort of state really the components of fitness which you feel are important, and then why. So how do they help the sports performer the most. So dealing with that idea of prioritization out of all 10 of them, or 11 of them, now which one is the most important and why? When do they use it? Which brings us to our final summary, really. So we started back with health, with the 4 different components: physical, mental, social, emotional. We looked at how physical activity can contribute to all 4 domains. We then looked over here at what fitness is, which is this ability to meet the demands of the environment. And just as that environment can change, so too can our attributes of fitness. And we've got these 2 main categories: health, general well-being, performance components, where if we refine those, we can become far better in specialist situations. Which brings us to the end. So hopefully now you know the definitions of all of the health and fitness components, from health related and performance. You should be able to define each of those and link them to a fitness, or either a fitness activity or a sporting context. And hopefully you are now equipped to be able to assess and evaluate the most important components of fitness for certain sporting individuals. And that is that. So thank you for joining me for that masterclass. I do hope it helped. Make sure you do download that activity sheet or the resource sheet, either locally, and you can handwrite or you can type up electronically. That is completely up to you. But yeah, hope it helped, and I'm glad you could join me. So I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.